In New South Wales, the opposition leader Peter Dutton speaking live at the moment.
Completely ineffective in representing her local community. Emma McBride the same. Residents that we speak to feel abandoned by their local member, and the Prime Minister should be receiving a hot phone call from Meryl Swanson and from her colleagues to say stop this nonsense. It's obviously a flawed process, as Ted points out, in relation to the lack of consultation, the tricky way that Chris Bowen undertook the consultation, essentially under the cover of darkness in a very short period of time. Locals weren't properly engaged, and that's why there is a very significant level of anger and concern about the impact. Where is it going to be onshored? The impact on those communities, that land, what it means when those pipes run back onto through the sand dunes back to the distribution point. All of that remains completely unanswered, and I don't think the government's position here is tenable. And as Ted points out, this whole process should be halted immediately. I'm happy to take any questions. Well, the consultation needs to be redone so that the local concerns can be properly understood. And I think if the local concerns are properly understood and acted on, I'd be very surprised if this project goes ahead. But it's clear to all and sundry, particularly when you speak to the locals who weren't aware of the consultation process that was taking place. We saw a rally only in the last couple of weeks, a lot of community sentiment expressed there, and these are multi-generational businesses and families who are impacted. These are young kids who are employed at the moment in all of these industries. Those jobs don't belong in an environment where you're destroying the natural beauty, and there will be a downturn, a very significant downturn in the tourism industry, in the fishing industry. All of that needs to be taken into consideration. Their views need to be heard by Chris Bowen, and so far they've just been ignored. Well, I committed to coming back because I do think this is an absolute travesty. And I do think when you go out into the waters and see the natural beauty, the bird life, all of that which is at risk, the marlin fishing obviously, which is a big part of the environment here, when you look at the whales and the mother and the calf that we saw out there, the dolphins, all of that is at risk because there's no environmental consideration of what these huge wind turbines, 260, 280 metres out of the water, will mean for that wildlife and for the environment. And the fact that the government hasn't taken that into consideration, as Ted said, it's clear what's happening here. They're completely and utterly driven by their desire to get to 82%, a reckless figure that they pulled out of the air. We're all in favour of renewable energy, but not at any cost and not where you're destroying jobs and livelihoods and the environment. Why would we seek to destroy the natural environment here to try and save the planet, which is not the trade-off that we should be talking about? There are other ways that we can firm up renewables. There are other ways that we can introduce zero-emission or low-emission technologies into the energy mix. But what they're proposing here with these wind turbines, literally, when you think about it, to stabilise a 260-metre structure out of the water in areas where there can be very high and volatile winds and an environment. Think of what's on the seabed anchoring that down. Concrete blocks the size of small ships, the chains and the anchor chains dragging along the ocean bed, the cables that come back in to be onshored to bring the energy back into the network. The 28,000 kilometres of new poles and wires Chris Bowen is promising, and Australians are paying more and more through their electricity bills because of this madness. I really think we need to stop and pause, listen to the local community, understand the lives and the environment that are going to be negatively impacted, and all of that should be taken into consideration. And local members are completely missing in action and not standing up for their local communities. Well, yeah, look, I think it's a fair point, because it's clear, I think, to all and sundry who are watching this debate, that Chris Bowen has run a very tricky process here. It's not been open and transparent, which is exactly what the Prime Minister promised at the last election. The locals haven't been sufficiently engaged. There's a $660 million tourism industry here that's at risk. There's a over $300 million fishing industry here that's at risk, $1 billion up and down the coast. And the livelihoods here of local residents rely on the sustainability of both the environment and the tourism dollar. They are great stewards of the local environment here. They fish in a sustainable way. The tourism operators have absolute regard for preservation of the waterways and the sea here, because that's their livelihood, and they're all being ignored. And they're all speaking with one voice at the moment, even though on most issues they might be at odds. There are environmentalists who have come together with fishermen and with tourism operators, and they're all speaking with one very strong and loud voice, and that is to stop this project. And Chris Bowen has conducted himself in a way that I mean, it's kept information and data from people. The environmental impact on the migration patterns or on the birds, on rare species, etc., it just hasn't been done. And there's no other project of this nature, if it was held onshore, could get away with that limited scrutiny or detail being provided to local communities. Well, we have long-term sustainable jobs now in the tourism and in the fishing industry. And I'll give you the Coalition's commitment. We're not putting those at risk. We're not going to destroy these jobs to create some short-term construction jobs. We're not going to destroy the local environment here in an effort to achieve our emission reduction targets. We're going to have support for projects which will firm up renewable projects. We're going to have investments, as Ted has spoken about, in all sorts of energy sources which can help us meet our decarbonisation of the economy. But we are not going to allow projects like this to destroy local environments and local jobs. And that's what Chris Bowen and Meryl Swanson and Emma McBride and Anthony Albanese are deciding on at the moment. And I think they need to listen to the local community, because destruction of the local jobs here, and not just here on the boats and in the local tourism operations, it's the jobs in the local community. It's the IGA that has to put a couple of young people off because the whole environment has been affected negatively by this decision. It's the local restaurants and the cafes and countless other local jobs out of small businesses that are adversely affected by a downturn in the local economy here, and that needs to be taken into consideration. Well, I think Meryl Swanson has completely let her community down, and I think there's going to be a very significant backlash against her and against Emma McBride and Sharon Clayton and others, because they are not standing up for their communities, they're not fighting for their communities, and I think it's very obvious that the local people that we've spoken to are completely and utterly bewildered by the lack of support from their local members. So yes, you can expect to see a lot more of us, but the most important thing to do here is to support the locals, who are good, decent people, just trying to work hard, provide for their families and their local community, and they're being given the short shrift by the Albanese government. All right? Thank you. Well, again, the government hasn't done its homework. We don't know about the environmental impacts on rare bird species. We don't know the impact on the seabed. There are so many elements to this, and I think it's really hard to explain to the local population here or elsewhere when people don't have the facts, don't have the figures, and they're being sold a pup. All right. Sure. Well, I'll make an announcement in relation to the Shadow Ministry changes in due course, and there's obviously a lot of talent that I've got to choose from on the backbench and in the Shadow Ministry, so I'll be making those decisions in due course.